Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. This channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. This presentation is titled African Magical Science, Part 1, a discourse. Why Part 1? Due to the fact that the African magical science is a long presentation, it is broken into Part 1 and Part 2. This is Part 1 of the presentation. Please, after listening to Part 1, endeavor to listen to Part 2 in order to get a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. So follow me as we go along. The purpose of this presentation is to explore African magical science. It should be noted that in Africa, science involves both the physical, material, tangible, and the non-physical, immaterial, intangible qualities. Therefore, in the African view of knowledge, it is necessary to have an understanding of both qualities of any phenomenon being studied. In this regard, Western science is particularly focused on the study and understanding of the physical quality of any phenomenon being studied. Such knowledge in Africa is viewed as a partial knowledge. To accomplish the goal of the presentation, the following arguments are made. 1. Magical science, which is a combination of both physical and spiritual mystical knowledge, is more advanced than modern science, which is limited to the study of the physical, tangible, material quality of nature and the universe. 2. Many so-called scientific discoveries are a replication of already existing knowledge in Africa and many parts of the non-Western world. 3. Due to magical science, Africans are not limited by the laws of physics like Europeans due to their reliance on reason and logic. 4. The component of physical science that is closest to magical science is quantum physics. 5. Eventually, physical science will catch up with magical science when quantum physics is fully developed. And 6. At that point, comprehensive or complete knowledge of nature and the universe will be achieved scientifically. Let's look at the relationship between quantum physics and spirituality. Some critics of this presentation, especially those oriented towards physical science, might oppose the topic of this presentation as being superstitious rubbish or gibberish. Nevertheless, it is increasingly the case that scientists are beginning to discover a relationship between quantum physics and spirituality mysticism. Olivier Martinez wrote, and I quote, "Quantum physics often seems like a distant and complex realm reserved for scientists in white lab coats. It challenges our understanding of reality at the smallest scales, where particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously and act in ways that defy classical physics. Moreover, the observer effect in quantum mechanics implies that the act of observation can influence the state of a particle, hinting at a deeper connection between consciousness and the material world. Such peculiarities make quantum physics ripe for philosophical exploration and have drawn parallels with spiritual concepts. Basically, this means that quantum physics falls under the realm of magical science because you have different variables interacting simultaneously without a very good physical explanation as to why. This is what in Africa some people might say is magic or juju. But as you can see, there is a close relationship between quantum physics and magical science. Now, let's look at the African concept of comprehensive knowledge. In Africa, comprehensive knowledge involves the study and application of 6 senses, including hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and intuitive psychic paranormal ability. This means that knowledge of the world involves the application of physical, material, tangible quality, as well as the non-physical, immaterial, intangible, spiritual quality of nature and the universe. This further means that in Africa, both the scientific point of view and the spiritual point of view are accepted. Additionally, Africans use both the scientific and spiritual methodologies to study and advance knowledge. The reason is that the scientific method is limited to the physical quality of nature and the universe, while the spiritual mystical method has no limitation in uncovering the truth or fact about any phenomenon in nature or the universe. The 6th sense involves the following: A. Developing alternate states of consciousness. B. Using divination in attaining insights into ultimate or hidden truths. C. Using powers embedded in parapsychology, such as extrasensory perception, in identifying hidden information. D. The use of telepathy, clairvoyance, teleportation, and levitation. E. The use of special herbs and herbal concoctions to connect to other spheres and beings. F. The ability to access the Akashic record of the universe. Now, let's look at the scientific methodology. What is science? As defined in previous presentations, science can be defined as the study of the structure, characteristics, and behavior of the physical, natural, and social world through systematic investigation, observation, and experimentation. It is a process or a means to understand how the natural world works. This method basically relies almost exclusively on gathering of data based on the application of 5 senses. The 5 senses are: A. Sight, B. Hearing, C. Touching, D. tasting, F. Smelling. Thus, scientific knowledge can only be acquired through systematic gathering, classification, and interpretation of data that have been carefully investigated, observed, and experimented upon. To do so, physical equipment and resources are necessary for the gathering, classification, analysis, and interpretation of data. Scientists therefore rely on A. Large sums of money. Indeed, scientific research is money intensive. That is why many countries in the world cannot afford to engage in extensive scientific research because of the cost involved. B. Laboratories. C. All kinds of equipment depending on the nature of the research. D. Trained manpower in specialized areas of science. E. Observation and field work. F. Excavation, such as in anthropology, geology, and archaeology. G. Surgical operations to examine and fix body part problems in humans and other animals. H. Advanced technological systems like satellites, radars, computers, and so forth to probe, observe, and record events in the cosmos. In magical science, it is not necessary to acquire complicated and costly physical equipment to probe, observe, and obtain knowledge. Any information can be acquired by consulting with higher beings to reveal the information. Likewise, information can also be obtained through developing a high level of consciousness or through divination. This means that in the African view of magical science, there is no separation between the physical world and the spiritual mystical world. The reason is that the physical world is a subset of the spiritual world due to the belief that the supreme intelligence or God, goddess, which dwells in the spiritual mystical world, gave birth to the physical world through creation. As a result, knowledge about any phenomenon is not limited to its physical characteristic alone, as scientists tend to imply. Now, let's look at the ancient Egyptian mystery schools and how those schools were used to integrate knowledge. To be able to apply both physical, that is science, and spiritual knowledge, the expert must be educated to develop skills in both areas of knowledge. It is for this reason ancient Egyptians established the mystery schools, where students were taught to master both physical and spiritual knowledge simultaneously. It is believed that Thoth, who is also referred to as Tehuti or Jehuti, the Egyptian god of knowledge, wisdom, letters, medicine, science, technology, and so forth, who is known as Hermes in Greek, Ningizida in Sumeria, Odun in Scandinavia, Votan among the Teutons, Teotihuacan and Kukulkan in Mesoamerica, and Totamol in native Australia, and so forth, established the mystery schools in ancient Egypt to advance knowledge in various fields. This is a symbol of the ancient Egyptian mystery school. Look at it very carefully, and you can see the physical and the spiritual symbolism involved. Again, this is a symbol of the Asian mystery school. The mystery schools were established to provide education that combined both physical and mystical spiritual knowledge. It should be noted that many ancient classical Greek scholars, including Archimedes, Pythagoras, Democritus, Orpheus, Socrates, Plato, Linus, Thales, Eudoxus, Heraclitus, Aristotle, and possibly Jesus Christ studied in the mystery schools in ancient Egypt. As a result, Archimedes studied mathematics and engineering and ended up becoming a mathematician, physicist, engineer, and astronomer. Pythagoras learned astrology, geometry, mathematics, music, the secret doctrine of numbers, and the heliocentric system of the universe in Egypt. Eudoxus learned astronomy and mathematics. In the book titled The Gospels of the Holy 12, Jesus Christ is reported to have gone to Egypt after his marriage to Miriam to study, and I quote, the wisdom of the Egyptians, and I unquote. The Bible did not say much about Jesus until he started performing miracles at about 30 to 32 years old. Some scholars have indicated that after studying in Egypt, he, that is Jesus, went to Tibet and India to study some mystical principles and practices before returning to perform miracles. It should be noted that Egypt, Tibet, and India were three of the major Asian centers of spiritual, mystical knowledge. Therefore, in ancient Egypt, the best engineers, scientists, mathematicians, physicists, medical doctors, and so forth were also psychics, parapsychologists, prophets, religious priests and priestesses, spiritualists, and so forth. Thus, they were able to engage in teleportation, telepathy, levitation, and receive information from other parts of the cosmos. The combined knowledge allowed for a comprehensive mastery of nature and the universe. Hence, it was not surprising that the Dogon ethnic group in Mali today, where the tribe religious priests and elders were able to detect the existence of Sirius B star through mystical means without relying on expensive physical scientific equipment. In almost every ethnic group and tribe in the past, including the Tuareg, Berbers, Fulani, Malinke, Igbo, Ijaw, Zulu, Ibibio, Efik, Ewe, Kikuyu, Luo, Shona, Oromo, Congo, Yoruba, and so forth, there were specialists, experts, whose knowledge transcended the physical world to embrace the spiritual world. The skills have not disappeared in Africa, but are suppressed today. The ancient Kushite, Nubian, Egyptian, African tradition continues in the 21st century. As a result, those Africans who are traditionally regarded as experts at both scientific and spiritual knowledge. This means that they can solve problems using physical means, as in modern science, and spiritually using divination, paranormal psychology, oracular consultation, telepathy, levitation, spiritual possession, and so forth. Since Africans believe in a higher authority, in other words, Africans believe that there is God or supreme intelligence, which is different from the Western belief in secular humanism today. Since African magical science involves both physical and non-physical spiritual components, there is a strong belief that human beings cannot be separated from God, gods, goddesses, spirits, dwarfs, mermaids, angels, jinn, elves, leprechaun, fairies, and so forth. This is why Africans are very spiritual in nature. The reason is that they are part of the cosmos, even though they dwell in different parts of the universe. For instance, A, humans dwell on Earth like other physical living organisms. And B, the other beings live in the spiritual world, which is greater than the physical world. Of these beings, humans are at the bottom of the pyramid with God at the top. Thus, there is A, God, B, angels, C, gods and goddesses, D, spirits or other beings, E, fairies, dwarfs, leprechaun, mermaids, elves, jinn, and so forth, F, ancestral beings, G, human beings. As you can see, human beings are at the bottom of the pyramid. Of all these beings, humans are the most limited in every aspect of existence due to their physical nature. The beings that dwell in the spiritual world have limitless capabilities. A, they can appear and disappear instantly. B, they can be in two or more places simultaneously. C, they can easily influence human behavior. D, they have advanced technological capabilities. E, their capabilities defy gravity. F, their level of consciousness is very high compared to humans. Now, let's look at African view of human nature based on African belief on a higher authority. Thus, due to the limitation of human beings and the limitless nature of the other beings, humans need to interact with them on a regular basis and gain knowledge in every aspect of existence, including understanding the curative properties of plants and animals, medicine generally, science and technology, the ability to transcend dimensions through teleportation, telepathy, levitation, see into the past and the future. African magical science is intended to develop a comprehensive knowledge about nature and the universe by actively interacting with the more advanced beings. Consequently, Africans are not shy about interacting with these beings in order to exchange information and seek knowledge. Basically, Africans today are like the ancient Cushites, Ethiopians, Nubians, Egyptians, Sumerians, Tibetans, Native Americans, and Native Australians who were not shy of admitting that alien beings or extraterrestrial beings came down to assist humans to develop science and technology, medicine, arts, and other specializations. Therefore, magical science encourages contact with other beings and sharing of knowledge physically and spiritually. Now, what is the African concept of being knowledgeable? In other words, in Africa, what constitutes being knowledgeable? As a result, being knowledgeable in Africa entails the understanding of both the physical and spiritual worlds, even today. A person is respected if the individual has extensive mystical knowledge. This is why the most knowledgeable individuals in Africa include A. Traditional religious priests and priestesses, B. Spiritualist marabouts, C. Traditional medical practitioners, that is, native doctors. It should be noted that native doctors are different from traditional religious priests and priestesses. A lot of people get these two confused. D. Elders. E. Prophets and prophetesses. F. Psychics. G. Members of secret and secret societies. H. Members of spiritually oriented high-level masquerade societies. I. The formally educated individuals who are also members of spiritual societies. And J. Those who are gifted with spiritual mystical knowledge from childbirth and have third eyes. That means they can see into the past, to the present, and to the future. This is why many Africans who have studied in the West and obtained advanced degrees often feel inadequate when they get back to Africa. The reason is that Western education is focused mostly on the acquisition of physical knowledge due to the emphasis on reason and logic, science and secular humanism. When these Western educated Africans return to their countries, they realize that they have little or nothing of spiritual or mystical knowledge, which is necessary for leadership positions in the traditional, cultural, religious, social, and political systems. To eradicate the inadequacy, many educated Africans end up being initiated into mystical societies where they learn to enhance their understanding of the spiritual world. Likewise, in many ethnic and tribal groups, traditional political leaders must be initiated into various mystical masquerade and religious societies in order for them to serve effectively as leaders. Why? Because it is essential for traditional leaders to deal with issues relating to the physical and spiritual worlds. Likewise, it is the only way to gain wisdom, which is very important in Africa. There are many Africans who can barely read or write in the Western sense, yet have advanced spiritual mystical knowledge that even Western educated individuals must learn from them to develop wisdom and have a better understanding of the universe. Thus, in many societies in Africa, the elders are very knowledgeable about the spiritual world to the extent that they can predict what is likely to happen if an individual takes a trip on a certain day or time. In Africa, many educated individuals, pastors, mullahs, imams, politicians, and the elite generally depend on the services of traditional religious priests and priestesses, spiritualists, native doctors, diviners, and so forth for the fortification of their spirits, souls, and protection generally. A person is respected if the individual has extensive mystical knowledge. This is why the most knowledgeable individuals must have wisdom. Quite often, Western educated individuals who are incapable of applying critical thinking in the traditional sense and be wise are regarded as those who have book knowledge. That implies that they lack wisdom. Thus, an African must have mystical knowledge to really understand the world, not just book knowledge. This is not unusual. It should be noted that most of the scientists in ancient Egypt and Africa generally and Sumeria were also spiritualist mystics. The most notables of these kinds of people were Thoth, Pettifera, and Imhotep. Imhotep was an engineer, architect, astronomer, physician, and statesman. It could be said that in every society in ancient times, including Europe, it was individuals who had spiritual capabilities that were the top scientists because of the ability to think outside the box and engage in astral travel to consult with other beings and gain information. A scientist, engineer who claimed to have received knowledge from Mars was Tesla. Tesla claimed to have received radio transmission from Mars while he was in Colorado Springs, USA. Some consider him as a genius who operated outside the scientific box and ended up with many patents. Some scientists derided him for saying that he received transmission from Mars because scientific knowledge at the time was not advanced like today. Thus, instead of blaming scientific limitation, Tesla was viewed as suffering from hallucination and possibly deranged. Well, a group of scientists announced recently that they have traced, and I quote, intense radio signals from space to their origin, I unquote. This confirms Tesla's commentary about radio transmissions from other planets. Even Werner von Braun, the father of rocketry and a major scientist in Germany during the Nazi era, alluded to the fact that other beings exist in the universe, and he was determined to develop a rocket that could be used to explore space. He even wrote a futuristic science fiction about Mars titled Project Mars. It should be noted that it was von Braun who came to the US and worked with the US NASA space program to develop rockets that are now going to space. The view that ancient scientists were also proficient in spirituality, mysticism, perhaps compelled many scientists in the Middle Ages and later in Europe to establish mystical, esoteric societies that were either connected to ancient Egypt or Greece. It should be noted that many of the Europeans who initiated modern science were influenced by magical science as developed in Egypt. Hence, most of them were members of mystical, esoteric societies. This is the picture of Dr. Werner von Braun, father of rocketry. Well, since the magical science is a very long presentation, hence it is broken into part 1 and part 2. Therefore, it is necessary to stop part 1 here and to continue presentation in part 2. So, this presentation will be stopped at this stage and the presentation will continue in part 2. So, to get a comprehensive picture of the story, it is important to listen to part 2 also. Thank you for listening to this presentation. The presentation will continue in part 2. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other very captivating presentations on different topics. Again, thank you very much. Do not fail to subscribe to the channel.